Hello. Let's talk about this activity real quick. It is stored in your class notebook. So if you need to, watch the video for how to get there. We are going to go there right now. And here is the activity. And I chose your class notebook for doing this because it's the easiest place to fill things in. So with these right here, you'll probably need, again, go to your Draw tab. You'll probably need to do text boxes. So you're going to click on your text box tab. Make sure that you open your text box off the image, otherwise it will not open, and then you'll drag it onto the image and be able to fill in your answers. So you can do that. Where it says to highlight, you can click on your highlighter over here, and you can pick on a color, and you can highlight what you want to highlight. When you get down to the flowchart, which is the main reason I needed to do it on here, again, you'll need to do a text box. So you'll go back to your text box, open it off the image over here, drag it in, and then just fill it out. Okay, so the video is fairly long, and it goes through all of the answers to these questions so that you have an idea of how breathing is regulated. If you need additional help, please talk to me. Let's get started on this.
In this activity, you are going to be watching a video on regulation of breathing and the gas that regulates that, which is CO2. And you are going to complete this activity, which is there's 3 pages to. You fill out this flow chart, and then at the end you're going to answer these 2 questions on CO2 regulation and on feedback loops. Here's the video.
I'm Dr. Derry Keats, a former professor of biology, and I'm here with you on the 3rd and last of our videos on human homeostasis. And today we're going to be looking at oxygen and carbon dioxide, gaseous exchange, and the regulation of carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in the blood, but especially carbon dioxide. Now, when we talk about respiration, it's unfortunate that in life sciences we use the term respiration in 2 ways. One, when we talk about the respiration or the energy metabolism that happens inside cells, and the second way is the breathing and gaseous exchange. So in today's video, we're using it in terms of breathing and gaseous exchange. Now, there's 2 molecules involved in respiration, oxygen and carbon dioxide. And the relation between the 2 and their transport in the blood is regulated, and it is regulated as a homeostatic mechanism that is under the control of negative feedback.
Hello again. Well, hopefully you got that. This is a negative feedback loop that we're looking at. Negative feedback loop. So make sure you look at that for question number 2.
And of course, the lungs are the major role player here. Now, when we breathe in normal air, it's about 21% oxygen, and there's a tiny little bit of carbon dioxide in there, about 0.04%. When we breathe out a gas mixture that contains about 15% oxygen and just over 4% carbon dioxide. Now, we often think that when we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. This is simply not true. We breathe in air that is 21% oxygen and has a tiny little bit of carbon dioxide, and we breathe out a gas mixture that is about 15% oxygen and about 4% carbon dioxide. Now, the fact that there's oxygen still in, and a substantial amount of oxygen still in this gas mixture, means that we can give artificial respiration. You know, when we find somebody who's injured, we can blow into their mouth, and their lungs and their blood system is able to extract the oxygen from that. So, thinking about the lungs and what happens is a topic that's known as gaseous exchange. And when we think about gaseous exchange, it's important to realize that gaseous exchange happens in the lungs purely via diffusion. And this is a passive exchange. Gas diffuses across membranes passively. And so as a consequence of that, there's only 2 things we can do to increase the amount of gas that gets into our blood. The amount of oxygen that gets into our blood, or the rate at which we get rid of carbon dioxide. One is to make the heart beat faster. If we make the heart beat faster, the blood flows to the lungs faster, and so the gaseous exchange happens more rapidly. The second way is to use our lungs and our breathing muscles and to breathe faster. And by breathing faster, we get more rapid exchange of gases. And when breathing faster and heart beating faster happen together, we can get more oxygen in and more carbon dioxide out more quickly. So we think about these two molecules, oxygen and carbon dioxide. And oxygen is the important one for us in terms of getting oxygen in because we need it in order to survive. We don't survive for more than a few seconds without oxygen at all. But we might think that oxygen is the thing that actually is regulated in the blood and that makes us, that controls our breathing rate and our heart rate and all of those things. But in fact, this is not true. It is in fact carbon dioxide that is the gas that when dissolved in the blood controls all of those aspects of our homeostatic mechanism with respect to our gaseous exchange. So let's look at this homeostatic mechanism now, because that's what this is all about. It's not about the physiology of respiration, but it's really just purely about homeostasis. Now, if we imagine normal carbon dioxide levels in the blood, then we do some physical activity. And as we do that physical activity, cellular respiration increases. And as a consequence of that, we produce more carbon dioxide. Because remember, carbon dioxide is a byproduct of cellular respiration. Now, the detector, the equivalent of the thermostat in our air conditioner, is the medulla oblongata. Now, the medulla oblongata is stimulated, and this is the detector. And
Hello again. You should be on this part of your activity right now and filling in this, and so I'm going to give you some background information so you can understand what's happening a little bit better. Let's go to my PowerPoint. Here we are, negative feedback loop, carbon dioxide levels and breathing rates. So let's review a little bit. So if you have physical activity, that leads to increased cellular metabolism. And cellular metabolism is where oxygen is being used in the cells. Here's our blood. So oxygen is going to be leaving the blood and going into the cells where it's used to break down food and get energy. Without oxygen, you cannot break down food. You cannot do cellular metabolism, and you cannot get energy, and then your cells will die. And in that process, so we use O2. In that process, carbon dioxide is produced in the cells. So we have CO2 that's building up in the cells, which then will diffuse into the blood to be removed. And in the blood, CO2 is a waste product. So what happens is we have our CO2 that's leaving the cell and going into the blood, and it combines with water and turns into something called carbonic acid, right, where the H dissociates, and that's the H+. So it makes carbonic acid in the blood. And when carbonic acid is made in the blood, the pH of the blood becomes more acidic, which means that the number actually decreases. So let's look at a chart of that so you can see. So if we have an increased CO2 use, the pH goes down. Right, so our blood becomes slightly more acidic. Now the range is really right in here. So instead of being 7.5, we go down to about like 7.45, 7.4. It's a very small decrease in pH scale. All right. So then what we have is we have our partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of CO2. So as our CO2 increases in partial pressure and the pH drops, receptors in the medulla oblongata, which is in the brainstem, recognize that lower pH, and they do something. They stimulate breathing muscles, and we're going to see that next. And this is called a negative feedback loop. So going back to our model, we have a stimulus, which is physical activity, which is causing CO2 to increase. We have a receptor. That receptor then is being stimulated, and it's activating a control center, and that control center is going to cause an effector or muscle to do something that lowers us back. So again, this is a classic negative feedback loop where we have something going up, and an activity is being done to lower that level back, so it comes back to a fixed point again. If this was positive feedback, then this line would keep going up and up and up until the job was done. all right? Because positive feedback is about getting the job done and moving away from a fixed regulation point until the job is done. All right, let's get back to our video.
It sends impulses out to the heart saying, hey, heart, beat faster, man. So the heart rate increases, and blood with carbon dioxide is brought more rapidly to the lungs. This by itself is not enough. The impulses are also sent to the breathing musculature saying, hey, breathe faster. And so our breathing rate increases.
Hello again. So we are at this part where the medulla oblongata is being stimulated. So let's go ahead and fill this in and make sure you understand this. Let's go to my PowerPoint. All right, so what we have is we have a stimulation which is causing the CO2 levels to increase in the blood. The pH levels are decreasing. So on our heart we have receptors that are noting CO2 and oxygen sensors, and they note if the CO2 levels are going up or if the pH is going down, and they will send a message to the medulla oblongata, which is on the base of the brain, right? And that medulla oblongata will then send out two signals. One signal will go to the heart, making the heart beat faster, man, beat faster. All right, and that will increase blood flow. And when you increase blood flow, more blood will be delivered to the lungs, so more CO2 can be lost. It will also stimulate the muscles in the diaphragm, which is right below, and that'll cause the increase in breathing, and the intercostal muscles to contract and expand or relax so that our breathing rate will increase. So we have increased blood flow and increased breathing rate, which will cause the CO2 levels to go down.
You know how we pant when we do exercise. Yeah, that's it. That's the breathing rate increasing. And so the carbon dioxide that is brought more rapidly to the lungs is also exhaled more rapidly. And so the carbon dioxide level of the blood drops, and we are back to the normal carbon dioxide levels. And so you can see this is a standard negative feedback homeostatic mechanism.
So this is a standard negative feedback loop. So next we're going to go ahead and put these phrases in order from 1 to 7, and then you're going to circle which of these highlighted or italicized large words best finishes the sentence about breastfeeding. So let's give you one more piece of information as you are looking at this. So breathing rate increases in CO2 levels is a standard negative feedback loop. Starting off with a stimulus, right? The CO2 levels in the blood go up, the pH drops, lower pH is detected by chemoreceptors, the brain, the control center, medulla, stimulates increased depth of breathing to the lungs and increased flow in the heart. Increased rate of removal of CO2 happens at the lungs. CO2 levels fall, the pH of the blood returns to normal, and normal CO2 and blood pH. All right, standard negative feedback. So you should be able to put those phrases in order.
Now that you're done, how do you share this with me? You go up to the share button here and you click on that, and you copy the link, and then you go to your submit button in Canvas and you post the URL in your submit button. Now you are done.